Sanofi's new podcast series, Inclusion Café, is a series of open and honest conversations between employees that explore topics such as race, mental health, sexual orientation, disability, and more. The series aims to break down the walls on the inside so we can better reflect and help those we serve on the outside. I'm Paul Rowe, Global Head of Immunology at Sanofi, and today I'm going to be chatting with my colleague, Sandra Yeboah, a medical science liaison, about the Black Lives Matter movement against racism and discrimination and what it means to us. Hey, Sandra, I'm looking forward to chatting with you today.
Hi, Paul. I wanted to talk to you about the recent events that have been happening in the US, specifically regarding the protest with the Black Lives Matter movement. What does it mean to you?
It was one thing for people to react to it in an emotional way and to express their concerns, but it was another thing to see when you saw people literally mobilize around the world. It was very important and very moving. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was very moved to see that for the first time, a lot of people from different countries in the world, different backgrounds, different religion, were gathered to support this movement and to also reject racism. So this is a strong message, and hopefully it will have a serious impact in the future.
For sure. Curious to, you grew up in France, I believe, correct?
Yes, born and raised in France, yes.
Yeah. So, curious to hear your experiences of being a person of color in France and what it was like for you. When did you first realize, your color and the differences between black and white?
So the first time I became aware of the color of my skin was during my childhood, really early on. I'd say maybe in kindergarten. It's when, I have to put the context also. I was the only black kid in my classroom. And so I had some questions and some remarks from other kids, and that made me feel like I was different from them. So that's when I realized that I was different because my skin was different. I didn't really focus on the fact that I was black. I didn't think way deep about it when I was a child. Also, my parents, they taught me to always be open-minded and just talk to just everybody, no matter their skin color, their ethnicity, or their religion.
Kids often don't see color, right? As a child, you don't see color. But now we also have adults saying, in different communities saying that they don't see color. And I think that fundamentally that's the way it should be, right?
Right.
But I think, unfortunately, that's not the way it always is. I liken it to when people respond to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter. I've had a number of discussions with friends about this whole topic and what's the controversy over it. And it's not so much that, of course, all lives matter, but the reason why, Black Lives Matter exists is because clearly, based on what we're seeing happening to African-American males in the U.S. in particular at the hands of the police, Black lives don't matter, to everyone, right? That's why the protest, came about. So it was interesting to see, sometimes people say that all lives matter or blue lives matter as a protest to a protest, but really, really missing the boat, I think, with that. But the reality of our situation is that we're not there and not everybody's there. So, what can we do as a collective so we don't have to have a Black Lives Matter movement, right? So, let's focus on that rather than making statements in contrast or in opposition to Black Lives Matter or things like that. That's my personal perspective.
All right, I understand. And also, sometimes I think the expression "I don't see color" is also a way to avoid to have these difficult, uncomfortable, painful conversations. And maybe it can bring some guilt and some discomfort. So people just want to avoid talking about it. And that's when they say, "I don't see color," from my perspective. So you asked me about how I grew up here in France. What about you?
My parents are Jamaican immigrants. They came from Jamaica and settled to Brooklyn, New York. Um, and so I was definitely exposed to a myriad of cultures, right? And then we moved to New Jersey, and I grew up in the suburbs. And there, I actually grew up in multicultural schools, and really there was a people got along very well in that community. Unfortunately, a friend of mine was actually shot and killed by a police officer when he was running away from them. He was in a playground. They were loitering or hanging out in the playground, and they ran from the police, and he was climbing a fence and was shot in the back. So, I was a teen then, and now, I have a son. He's not a teen yet, but the conversation I'm going to have with him about these situations, or I have been having with him actually as an 11-year-old,
Mhm.
because he's to me he's still a little boy, but he's to others, he's tall, and he's still a baby to me, but when he goes out into the real world, so to speak, he has to realize how people may treat him based on color of his skin, and that's a sad thought to me. It's a very sobering thought to me.
So, what do you think will change some attitudes or behaviors in this society?
That's a really good question. I think education, knowledge, a lot of what drives this is ignorance and failure
Right.
to really, understand the other perspective. As you said, painful conversations need to happen. Not everybody were as fortunate as us, to be able to be in environments where growing up where there are lots of different colors and lots of different nationalities. There are people who sometimes don't interact with people of another race for their majority of their young lives.
Mhm.
It's crazy as that sounds, right? So, or choose not to, right, based on how they were raised. So, just taking the first step of having the conversations, having the difficult conversations, trying to understand each other's perspectives, and just really educating people about things is probably the only way that things are going to change.
Right. I completely agree with you. Education, I think, is key to see some real changes in the society, especially with children as well, to be able to teach them at an early age about tolerance, about being open minded, and accept just everybody despite their differences.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think Sanofi is doing right? And what do you think Sanofi is doing wrong?
Well, I think to build a diverse and inclusive workforce, it would be important first to be fair in the recruitment, which I think Sanofi is, to be able to recruit people based on their potential experiences and regardless of the color of their skin or religion or gender, etc. And then I think this initiative of podcast is a great example to be able to share stories with another employee and to have a discussion. This is a very good way to be able to discuss and even debate on certain specific topics and for people to be more at ease at work.
You mentioned recruitment, right?
Right.
You mentioned, I think, fostering the right environment. So it's not just about getting that. I think that's a really important point. It's not just about getting talent of diverse talent here. It's also about retaining them, right? So how do
Mhm.
you retain them? You have to foster the right environment. I think things like this help with fostering that environment, right? Curious to ask you, one thing while we're on Sanofi, is there any difference in the environment? You've been in both. You've had you spent time both in the U.S. and in France. So, is there any difference in the environment between? Just curious, say, Bridgewater and Cambridge versus France.
So I would say, based on what I've seen and experienced, in Bridgewater, there was more diversity than where I am based here in Gentilly, in France. Um, but I think it's due to the two different countries. It's not really a choice of the company. I think it's linked to who apply.
I think that would be a really good follow-up
Right.
discussion with the right people on the phone, because I wonder, to your point, there may be some geographic. Would you see the enthusiasm and acceptance of these types of meetings and discussions more in New Jersey, more in France, or the same? So
I think the enthusiasm would be more in the US, in Bridgewater, for example, because in France, in general, in the culture, racism is a bit more taboo. We don't necessarily talk about it. For example, with everything that happened with the protest, I didn't really discuss it a lot with my French colleagues or with other French people. It's it's something that is painful and brings this discomfort to a lot of people. So I feel like here it's more taboo.
yeah, very interesting. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to shift gears and ask this one. You know, what do you hope for the future?
So I would hope that things change, definitely, that we don't have to see other events that leads to this kind of protest. That would be great. And to bring it to Sanofi and to the workplace, I would be happy to have the same opportunity as just anybody else, as a woman, as a Black woman, and as a young employee. How about
Oh,
you?
that makes sense. Yeah. I think you said it well. I think at the end of the day, we want it to have a fair chance and to have everybody have the fair chance. I don't think people are looking for, privileges. I think everybody wants to have the equal opportunity uh, that should be provided to them. What do you think about the recent election situation in terms of from Kamala Harris?
It is a very big deal because she's the first woman to be vice president. So only that is a great message to every woman in the world, I think. And also being a woman of color is also a very powerful message. Very positive. It gives hope.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I think it does give a lot of hope to a lot of people around the world.
So, last question: what is your motto or philosophy that you live by?
That's a great one. I get it from my father and my mother, which is treat people the way you want to be treated. It doesn't matter who a person is. Treat them with respect, with dignity, and spread love. That's really how I live, and try to teach my kids to live that way too.
So, my philosophy would be I consider that life is full of challenges, and it's up to us to choose to use a challenge as an opportunity to grow or a way to try something and fail, but then learn and move on. So that's my philosophy.
I think that's a good philosophy. I think it's a really good one. So I guess that's it. It's a pleasure chatting with you. Um, Hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Yes, that was great. Thank you, Paul.
No problem.